or like the animal, but with a Y instead of an I, depending on how you like to look at it. I'm really running because I'm frustrated right now with the fact that Arizona is becoming more and more unlivable and unaffordable from a lot of people. We need affordable housing, affordable and accessible healthcare, and affordable and, of course, available water and electricity. A lot of people are suffering from utility prices skyrocketing. In short, we just need an Arizona that everybody can afford and that people can enjoy to retire to and in. I'm also really passionate about public education, about getting rid of the fraud in the vouchers. And, if we had a legislature that would pay attention to that, we wouldn't need an initiative to get on the ballot with, 300,000 signatures. It could just be a vote. And with a Democratic governor, it wouldn't be hard to get it passed. So here we are stuck having to get all these signatures, but we will. It'll happen because enough of us are passionate about that. As Joseph mentioned, I was born in the state of Washington, but I spent most of my time in a military family in the West, and I went through public schools. I graduated from college in Idaho, but when I went off to Idaho to go to school, I got a couple of academic scholarships so I could afford it. But my parents took the chance to move to Southern Arizona. They moved to Green Valley back in 1976. So I taught school, seventh grade math, for a year after I graduated from college in Boise, Idaho. I like to say that it was so hard to teach math in seventh grade that I decided I needed to go in the military. So I did. But really, the truth is, I missed since I grew up as a service brat, I kind of missed the whole service orientation. I wanted to go back to work for the country. And not that teaching isn't, because it is a service to the communities just as much as the military is a service to the country. Um, but 26 years later, I retired out of the Pentagon as a colonel. I stayed in the area as an IT management consultant for a few years. I did command twice, and I worked at NATO. I was in charge of the NATO satellite systems during the Bosnia War, and I negotiated some IT system deployment between international players who didn't agree on how we were going to handle some planning systems. I negotiated a big contract for the Air Force with Microsoft and saved about $500 million for the Air Force in an Air Force wide contract. So I did some fun things. And then my mom needed somebody closer. My stepfather had died, and she was by herself, and she was aging. So I moved to Saddlebrook, which is about 25 miles north of Tucson. My mom was 25 miles south of Tucson, so that was about the right about the right distance for her. She was enjoying her independence until she couldn't anymore. But anyway, I got involved in different activities in the community here. I took over the Democratic Club after I showed up one time after Obama got elected. I thought everybody'd be excited. I walked in the room and there were 13 people there, and I said, "Whoa, there's something wrong with this." So I went ahead and became the chair of the Democratic Club here in Saddlebrook, and I went from, in about 18 months, went from about 13 people to 425 members. And I did that through, a lot of things: publicity, a very attractive programming, getting good speakers in, just like, you're doing today, right? And also just a lot of advertising, getting the word out in the community. And I helped in the meantime with a lot of fundraising activities for nonprofit organizations too around Southern Arizona. Enjoyed doing that. So, I mean, that's kind of a rundown on me. I have several basic areas. Affordability is the biggest, and that's mostly healthcare and housing and utilities. But there are a lot of other things that we need to be concerned about. I think the biggest thing for me is just for you to know that no matter which district you're in, because I know you're not all in RLD, if we get elected, and we will, we get to represent you and your values in the legislature. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Holly. Edgar, welcome. Hello, thank you, Joseph, and I could just say ditto with everything that Holly said as far as why she's running. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself so you get to know me. So I've fifth generation Tucsonan, been here all my life. The only time I was away was for college and for the military. And the reason I'm running is because currently I'm a vice president at Pima Community College. I've been there for 32 years in a lot of different capacities, from a coach, athletic director, to a dean of fitness and wellness, dean of arts and humanities. I've traveled the world in a lot of different ways, and what I know that we all want the same thing. Everywhere I go, people want to love and be loved, and they want their life to matter. And what I've noticed at Pima Community College is that we have more leverage than any other institution to make a difference because we accept students wherever they're at. And I've seen lives transform with access to opportunities so they can reach their full potential. And I want to create that access like I had it when I graduated college and was 27 and was a middle school social studies teacher. I was able to buy a house on my salary. I have a 32-year-old son who just moved back with me about a year ago because he's a social worker and can't afford a house. So my other son is living in New York City because the jobs that are available here don't pay him as much. So I want to make sure that we have in Arizona, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. And this is why I'm even more excited because we can flip the legislator. I think one of the reasons that the ADLCC selected Holly and I is because of our military background, right? Holly and I took an oath to protect the Constitution, and we are going to do that whether we're currently in the military or retired or whatever it is. And things have just gotten so out of whack, and we didn't make sure that we get to back to our American ideals, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. But this is where I think Holly and I need your most help. We know LD-17 is I think it's a +8 Republican district. That number fluctuates a little bit, but there's a lot more Republicans than there are Democrats. There's more independents than there are Democrats. So in order for her and I to win, we need to connect with those Republicans and those independents. And so what I'm going to ask all of you is I'm pretty confident, or I hope that Holly and I can earn your vote and your trust here. But I really need to talk to some of those independents, and I'm just going to share a quick story, and then I'll be done, Joseph, and you can ask us questions. When I ran for county supervisor a couple years ago, I was handing out my card to everybody, and I would just give my card to everybody, and I would always mention that I was in the Marine Corps because that usually opens the door with Republicans, right, or with independents. Gentleman and his wife were going to vote. He had a hat that said F Joe Biden. This is when Joe Biden was still in office. This was the primary back in June, July time. And his shirt said, if you vote for Joe Biden, you're stupid. I still gave him my card, had a conversation. He's like, are you, I told him I was in the Marine Corps. He said, you Democrat or Republican? I said, well, I'm Democrat. He starts telling me how the Democrats lie, this and that, and I'm just kind of listening, and I'm kind of just throwing in there how Trump has lied about this. He said he was going to do this. He said he was going to do that. So we go back and forth. They go in and vote. They come back out. We start talking about things. Yeah, I want a safe community. Yeah, I want secure borders, but I also want to be humane. Yeah, we want good public education, but we've got to fund it. So we went back and forth. And by the end of the conversation with him, a friend of mine are going out to put up one of my signs or to fix one of my signs. He says, "Hey, I'm sorry I got so excited about it and so passionate about it, but if you show up in the general, I'll vote for you." And that made me realize like we've got so much more in common than we do that it's different. And we need to continue to have that dialogue. And I need to talk to those people who have a perception about us, about me, because we need to flip this legislator. There is nothing that Democrats are sponsoring that is getting through. There's a few little things, but nothing that is going to set up Arizona for a future that is going to be not just for me, but for my kids and my kids' kids. So I'll leave it with that, Joseph, and you could ask questions.
Thank you. We do want to ask for your positions, your ideas on three topics, and I hope there'll be time that there'll be some others that our members will lob at you. Um, since you were at the podium, Edgar, I'll start with you and then come to Holly immediately afterwards on the question of education. As you all know, Arizona is in the bottom of the U.S., number 41 or 50, depending on what metric you use. And what I'm interested in is what can the legislature do? What can you as legislators do to deal with the status of public education in the state and particularly the balance between competing demands for funding for public education and the voucher program.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I know firsthand I was a public school teacher, and I see education is the backbone of our country, the backbone of our state, of our communities, and we don't properly fund that, we're in trouble. Article 11, that is our job to fund public education, right? And if we're funding it at the lowest level, and our students are still, I think we're in the late in 38th or something like that as far as when they measure math, if they measure writing, all that kind of stuff. Think about it. We just put a little more effort, a little more funding. We paid our teachers and our faculty the way they should be paid. We could probably do a lot better. Right now, these ESA vouchers are decimating public school system, and there's no accountability with it. So us taxpayers, in order to be good stewards of our taxpayers' money, we need to make sure that this funding is going to places where we're actually getting some measurable results, that it's better, and it's not happening right now. There is no accountability. There's nothing to say that what they're doing is working or not working, and there is no cap on how much this can go. And those vouchers that were expected to go to people that need them most are going to the most affluent people that were already paying for their kids to go to private schools. So we can do a much better job with education. But the other part is this: we need to make sure that education isn't about just accessibility, it's about outcomes. The world is changing. Jobs that existed 20 years ago don't exist now. And we need to make sure that what we do it in an innovative, smart way so that we prepare our students for jobs that are going to exist, to good paying jobs. Because I still teach a class at Pima Community College. And when I talk to my students, they don't know a lick about politics. You know what they want? They want a good job with a livable wage to live a life of meaning and purpose. So we need to make sure that we have pathways to these good jobs. And I'm not saying just your traditional liberal arts kind of degree or some 4-year degree. There's things in the trades. We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need machinists. And so at Pima Community College, that's what we've been able to do. The other thing, and I'll end with this because this is how I think we can make a huge impact really quick. Early childhood education. 90% of a child's brain is developed from 0 to 5. There's a famous Nobel Prize winning economist, you can look him up, James Heckman, who says for every dollar you put into early childhood education, you get a $4 to $16 return because you aren't going to have those remedial courses. And I'm talking about quality early childhood education. I have built two at the campus I'm at Pima Community College. We have 5 campuses. I built one for 1 and 2 year olds and 3 to 5 year olds. You can change things. They determine on how many jails and prisons they're going to build. They're looking at third grade reading level. So if we can invest in early childhood education, and it can be done, the state of New Mexico has done it, we can really make a difference. So I'll end there and let Holly jump in.
Thank you, Holly.
Well, there's not a lot more to add to that. That was great, Edgar. It really was. You covered a lot of bases. And I mean, what it really comes down to is we are doing reasonably well, as Edgar said, somewhere between 35 and 38 in performance, but by all standards that we can measure. But we are 48th to 50th on any given day for funding. That tells me that we have some fabulous educators in our classrooms. Unfortunately, one of the problems is many of those really great educators are getting close to retirement age. So when they're gone, we've now filled a lot of our classrooms with uncertified teachers, long-term substitutes, and some of the classes have just gone away. We've combined them because we didn't have teachers. We have something like 4,000 classrooms that don't have, old classrooms before they started the combining that are empty. So I mean, really, what it comes down to is kind of what Edgar alluded to is money. We have not properly funded public education in this state since about 2006. In 2000, we passed a constitutional amendment by an initiative from the people that said that public education would be funded with an increase every single year for inflation. And it doesn't mean 100% of inflation, but there was a formula, and that was passed by initiative, and we have not complied. In 2008, or I'm sorry, after the 2008 recession, in 2011, when the Republicans had a supermajority, they cut public education. They cut it, and they were supposed to raise it. I think everybody kind of understood the state didn't have as much money as it was supposed to have because of the recession, but they didn't bring it back. They slowly started bringing some of it back, but we still aren't anywhere near close to where we should be right now. And that includes capital investment. So what we've done is a lot of band-aids. Now the legislature's passed the law where you don't have to be certified teacher to teach in a classroom. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's treating teachers like they're not professionals. Um, so, when we combine that with we need to have fully funded kindergarten, we need fully funded early childhood education, we have half-day kindergarten funded. I mean, it's just silly the things that we're doing. And as Edgar said, they decide by third grade how many prisons they're going to build because they know by third grade, what the population is going to be like. And I can just imagine what those assessments are coming out now. It's been terrible, 15 years since we've had, a fully funded classroom. So pass this initiative. That's number one. And then I would like to see us start fully funding education and see what the consequences are. Regardless of the vouchers, let's fully fund, and then what'll happen is the citizens are going to want us to start clawing back that voucher money anyway, because there won't be any money for roads or public safety or all the other things that we need in this state.
Thank you, Holly. It's clear to me that both of you have thought about this a lot, and of course, I wouldn't have expected otherwise. I want to shift to a high technology subject.
Just one thing, Joe, there's a question from Amy about knocking on doors. Is in the chat.
Yeah.
Can I ask that question before
Just real,
presentation?
yeah, just real fast before we move on to the next topic. I know you guys are probably already starting to knock on doors, and I did a little bit of that in 2024, and I came across voters that have the ESA voucher, and they're really torn because I think they align values wise in some respects and a lot of other topics, but they're like, we really need that ESA, and they were like, we just don't know how we're going to vote. So I'm just wondering if you have like a way to bridge with those people.
Well, I mean, I would say, you could cap it at certain levels of income. Like the example I heard the other day was, in Texas with these vouchers that they use, Elon Musk has 8 kids that would be going through school. Elon Musk would be able to qualify for this and would get like 1.2 million from the state where he doesn't. So we need to have some income caps on it. Also, if we're going to do these, because you're right. I think the toothpaste is out the tube. It's going to be really difficult to bring it all back, but there's got to be some parameters and there's got to be some oversight as far as what these students, if these private schools are taking voucher money, we need to see if what they're doing is working. If these homeschool students are doing this, there needs to be some accountability attached to, just like they do with charter schools and public schools. And the next thing, there needs to be some safety attached to it because, if we go into public schools and we work there, we got to get fingerprinted. They got to make sure that their children are safe. There's no safety oversight as well. So, yeah, that's what I would say to those voters.
And I kind of agree that we're not going to get vouchers killed, anytime soon, if at all. But there are two things you can say to somebody like that. One is, well, if you're using it properly and you're really using it to educate your child, you have no worries. We're not going to take it away from you. And number two is, if your child is disabled in any way, the voucher initiative that we are trying to run right now will not affect that funding at all. That disabilities, exceptional children are an exception to every other item in this initiative. So I'd say don't worry about it. But the people who are abusing it, those are the people we need to clamp down on.
Okay, thank you. Great answers. Great for me to learn messaging.
Good. We're going to turn to a different topic in high technology. We've all read a lot about data centers and about the growth in this high-tech industry, also about the risks that it poses in terms of demand on water, electricity, viability of neighborhoods. And so I'm interested in what would you see as opportunities for legislators and the legislature to deal with the data center um, challenge? And maybe start with Holly on this one.
Well, I think Kevin tried to run a bill that was really, really smart. Kevin Volk, our LD-17 representative, who's in there right now. Basically, what you do, you basically disincentivize the data centers. You make it hard for them, so they don't want to be here. We have made it easy for them in the past because we made a decision strategically several years ago that Arizona needed to start focusing on something besides just housing developers and that kind of business. So they started looking around, the legislature looked around and decided that one of the businesses that they would try to incentivize was data centers. And we did it so well that everybody wants to come here. Well, now we recognize that data centers are really good for jobs right at the beginning, but then the jobs all go away once they're built. And we're stuck with these huge electric bills, driving utility costs up, and the water problems because they take so much water. So what you do is you just basically make them pay for all of that. We did incentivize it. Now we need to stop it. We need to say you've got to pay for your construction. You have to pay for the same water prices that residents do. You have to pay the utilities just the way residents do. You have to pay for it just like everybody else. And we just it'll slow down that way. I think that's about the only thing the legislature can do right now. Over to you, Edgar, if you've got brilliant ideas.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the one thing is that when this first started, there was incentives because we knew future and AI and all the things that were happening. Now we're saturated with data centers. Now there's some data centers. One of the ones that is just on the edge of Pinal County, Pima County, that was Project Blue here in Tucson. What was different that they did in Marana is they put some policy and some rules behind it, right? Because that might be something also that's already toothpaste out the tube. So now we got to figure out how to, mitigate it in a way that it doesn't impact our future water. I think, like Holly said, I think we're saturated. We have enough data centers now, and that we shouldn't be giving anybody incentives. We need to be really transparent with it because if us taxpayers are paying, all the tax for these data centers, that doesn't make sense. It needs to be reversed. And so we need to change some of those legislation that was built in a while back because we've kind of gotten to the point we don't need as many data centers. But if someone's going to come do that, they need to show us how they're going to do it with the least amount of water. There's ways to air cool. And I'm not for data centers, but I'm just saying if somebody is going to come in, you've got to have a plan that we're going to have sustainable water and you got to be transparent with it because the reality is there's not a lot of jobs with data centers. People, maybe when you're building them, but there's not a lot of jobs there. The development that we need to attract are developments that are in harmony with our beautiful Sonoran Desert. And there's ways to do this where you revegetate, you renovate, housing, some of these things are important and some of these developers do have good jobs. But there's like when Caterpillar came in, they were really kind of just worked in harmony with our environment. I don't know if they do, but I know some other corporations and businesses that came in. They had early child education available for their employees. So we've got to attract the right type of developers and the right type of development because here's the reality. Arizona is growing and we don't want to just sprawl everywhere. We want to do it in a very kind of smart way, in a well planned out way. I've got two boys. My fiance has three kids. I want to make sure there's water for them and their kids. I mean, you get to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the first things? Food, water, shelter, right? So those are the things that we need to plan in a smart way and not be in a situation where we're just sprawl everywhere and it's not really well planned out. But yeah, I think we have enough data centers. We're good.
Thank you. One last question from me in an entirely different dimension, and that's constitutional rights, a topic that is sort of embodied by the issues of immigration and the treatment of immigrants by the current administration, law enforcement interaction. with communities, attacks on voting rights and access to voting. Um, so again, in the sense of what can you as legislators do to attack this particular area? Maybe we'll start with Edgar this time.
Yeah, you know, the one thing, if you have a chance and if you can follow Adrian Fuentes, our Secretary of State, he's done a really good job of articulating what we can do and how we do it in a way where we want to make voting more accessible while also making it more secure, right? And so there's discussion about, you know, when you go and you get your driver's license to get your, get registered to vote. I mean, we want more people voting. And I've never gone out to vote and have not shown my ID. I've always showed my ID when I vote. The issue is they want a passport or they want your birth certificate. So if you're a woman and your name changed, or if you have to go purchase a passport, you're not gonna be able to vote. So that's not right. We need to make it easier and more accessible. So the legislator can make sure that we put things in place so that we don't ever lose that. Also to make sure that we don't lose mail-in voting, right? I mean, 80% of us use mail-in voting. I do it every year. So we need to make it accessible and we need to put laws in place that doesn't allow us to take away our civic right to vote. So I think that's important. Was that the only, were you just talking about voting, Joseph, or was there something else with that?
Well,
Did you
sort
talk
of
about
lumps
immigration
a
also?
lot of issues into there. To me, certainly voting is one that's prominent in the way the
Oh,
legislature operates today. But there are other issues that I just give you the opportunity to talk about if you wish, such as immigration.
oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so like I said, I'm a fifth generation Arizonan, right? I've been here. My dad's been here. My dad was in the Marine Corps, right? And one of the things that I've got a whole nother story about how the border became a lot more militarized. It was actually a Marine Corps general, General Chapman, who was a Marine during the Korean and Vietnam War, who secured the borders and locked everybody in because we used to have what was called a bracero program, where people could go back and forth and work, and it worked really well. And that's the kind of bridges we should be doing now. Yeah, we should have secure borders. We people are here, and I come across a lot of students that got here when they're 2, 3 years old, so they're having to pay out of state tuition or having to, well, not out of state tuition. I think we've got that worked out, but they don't qualify for financial aid and a lot of different things. Now, however they got here is how they got here. You could blame Republicans, Democrats, you could blame a lot of different people. Okay, we are where we are. Well, what we can do is we can put some things in place so they don't have to live in the shadows. And if they have not committed any felonies, they've done everything right, and they're here, maybe there's something we could do. And I've heard this example, and I don't know if it's a great example or not, but okay, you come forward, you let us know you're here, and we do a check, make sure you haven't committed any crimes, and you can be here 5 to 10 years, whatever we decide. And if you do things right and you do things correct, then you can earn your citizenship. But before that, yeah, you can't vote, you can't do these things. We're here, and this is where we are. But the other thing is this, and this is how I've kind of lived my life, and the reason I think I've been at Pima for over 30 years. I've treated every student like I'd want my own two boys to be treated. I've treated every employee like I'd want my mom, my sister, my brother to be treated. No matter how they are or how they got here, they need to be treated like human beings. And I always said, if legislators, if people treated them like you'd want your own family to be treated, you're always going to be on the right side. And so I think that's important, is to be humane and compassionate and understand that we're all human beings. That's all I got. Well, I
Thank
got
you.
more, but I'll let Holly talk now.
Yeah, Holly.
Well, I guess I feel like it's time for public safety to keep the public safe. And I think that Minnesota did a pretty good demonstration of this. We can use local law enforcement to make sure that the citizens are protected from the federal folks who aren't really law enforcement. And I mean, it's not absolute, but it certainly can be helpful. And I think that's a great first step, is just to kind of step up and say, this is the way we're going to use our local law enforcement. Protect us, make sure our constitutional rights are kept safe. If people are demonstrating, they're demonstrating. If they're being as long as they're being lawful, then they can't be arrested. As far as the people who are here, quote, illegally, there are, our immigration laws are pretty complex. And 99% of those folks are probably okay in one way or another. They came here maybe illegally. We found them. We're going to process them. If they ask for refugee status, then they're awaiting sometimes years and years and years, to get into immigration court and go through that process and get protected. But those who are doing it lawfully and going through that process lawfully ought to be left alone. Those who are not have been deported, and they always have been. And actually, President Biden and President Obama deported lots and lots of people who were here illegally. Now, is the immigration system great? No, it's not. We actually, as you all probably know, we had an immigration bill ready to go 2 years ago, right? While Trump was running, and it had gone through the House or gone through the Senate. It had almost completely gone through the House, and basically, candidate Trump asked the Congress to kill it because he wanted to run on immigration. So everybody knows, and everybody's in my whole life. I grew up a lot in Southern California too. My whole life, we've all known that the immigration system's broken, but you don't solve that problem by taking anybody who has the wrong color skin and arresting them and throwing them in a detention center without access to due process for, days, if not months, before you finally figure out that they are not here illegally, or they were, a 2-generation or 3-generation citizen. They have a funny accent. I have had friends visit from Europe who have very, very thick accents, and I tell them, carry your passport with you. Make sure you've got it with you so that nobody thinks that you're claiming to be a U.S. citizen. You're just a visitor. You're a tourist here, and that's all you are. It's scary. And I think that it's up to local law enforcement to make sure that we aren't scared, that, as much as we can, that we feel safe in our own homes and our own communities.
Thank you. I haven't been watching, Tina or Margaret, to see if people have put questions in the chat, but I want to give at least a few minutes to everyone else to question.
I put my cell number in there, and I want you all to take that down and use it. And if you ever want to invite me with some of your independent friends, or I don't know if you have Republican friends, but anybody that I can sit down and talk to, because I just want to be able to have some dialogue. And so that's for you to use. It's all on my cards, so feel free to reach out and if you want to connect.
Yeah.
Holly just posted her email address too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't say, please put questions in the chat and we will call on you. So maybe we can look at the different screens and people can raise their hand or put and I'll try to keep track of the order. If people have questions, if you know how to raise your hand or put a question in the chat, either or, and I'll monitor that as best I can. So no hands raised yet, because we are a small group, so no questions so far, which means our candidates have given us a lot to think about and has done a really nice job introducing themselves.
Yeah, I certainly agree. This has been terrific to get to know you each a little bit.
Oh, here's
okay,
a question.
Marlene has a question.
Go ahead.
If you're lucky enough to be in a Democratic majority in the legislature come 2027, what would be your 2 priorities?
You want to go first, Holly? Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I'll take a quick crack at it. Number one is public education, period. We have to do whatever we can to make sure it gets fully funded and that we start rebuilding, because it's going to take years to get it back, and we need to get started as quickly as we can. But the second one probably, I mean, it's a real toughie. It's between affordable housing and healthcare. Uh, I think a lot of folks are focused on affordable housing, but one of the concerns I have noticed that it seems like a lot of people aren't focusing on is healthcare accessibility. Not just the fact that, you know, people are losing their insurance, which is terrible, but that's the big, beautiful bill, right? We need to figure that out. But also the fact that there aren't enough healthcare providers. And, I have a lot of friends who've left the state. They have great insurance, but they can't get to a doctor. And I have people in these retirement communities like mine and like the one up the road here. I say to them, hey, how are you doing? Oh, we're really great. But then when I start drilling down into healthcare, they're just thankful that they're healthy because their primary care managers have left. They've had several because they keep moving out of state. Why is that happening? Well, doctors and healthcare providers move for the same reasons we all do, if they can. They can't raise their kids in a quality environment if they don't feel like they can. They see the water crisis looming on the horizon, and like a lot of us, our housing costs or our housing values are depreciating because people all over the country know we're facing a water crisis, and they don't want to move here on a gamble, and they don't make enough money. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons, and I think it's a checkerboard that we can figure out, and we can actually incentivize healthcare in this state if we work it. I just went to a briefing the other day about pharmaceuticals, and it was really interesting. I'll tell you two quick things. Several people mentioned the price of drugs, but one of the things they said, or one lady said, I have had the same prescription for 35 years. I've either paid $3 a month or $6 a month. And I went to fill it last month and it was $1,000. And why was it $1,000? Well, she talked to the pharmacist. We have a nice independent local pharmacist, and the pharmacist was able to get it back down to $6. Her healthcare system, and I can't even describe to you, but basically there are about 7 layers of profiteers between the time that the drug leaves the manufacturer until it gets into a patient's hands. And in those 7 layers, many of them are owned by one company. And what they've done is they've created all these subsidiary companies, each one to make a profit on a step, and another step and another step. So if any one of those decides that it's not going to make enough profit on some drug, then basically it raises the price of the drug. And any one of them. And then everybody who is using that particular pharmaceutical system or drug provider ends up paying those. If we could get rid of 6 of those 8 steps, look at all the money we'd be saving. There are things like, and there are states that are doing that. They're making it impossible for those other steps to be there. There's stuff like that we can do at the legislature.
So your priorities are education and healthcare access and affordability.
Yes.
Edgar.
Yeah, so education, of course, with for me, what I do and dual enrollment, a lot of different things. So I'll kind of, you all know my history. I've been in 30 years in service in community college, but I'm going to say kind of along the lines of what Holly said. So healthcare, I had the same situation when I got a prescription for Paxlovid, and they fluctuated the price up and down. It took me a while, and it eventually was free, but it went from 1,000 to 400. There's got to be transparency there. When my son had surgery, I was going to pay $2,800 for the deductible, and then they said if you pay, in this payment plan it's 1,800, but if you pay today it's 700. So there's got to be transparency, right? The other thing is housing. My mom's 93 years old. Her mortgage has gone from 1,100 to 1,700, not because she refinanced or anything, but because of property taxes and homeowners insurance. Her homeowners insurance was overcharging her by 4 times the amount. She's done everything right. She's loyal to Farmers Insurance. She's been with them for 50 years. She didn't want to lose them. they end up sending me $4,600 back or her $4,600 back, but there's no transparency with homeowners insurance and it just keeps going up and up, even though you might have not had a claim. So those are the things that I think at the legislative level we can determine, make sure that they're transparent and people aren't getting gouged just because they can. So we need some protections with those kind of things.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we have Jackie and then Jean who have questions.
Yes, my question is for Holly. I know that you have also talked about accountability as part of your mission. Could you address that for just a minute?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jackie. I appreciate that. I think accountability in government is a lot of what Edgar's been talking about. Transparency, we can make a lot of things transparent. I also think that the whole voucher program has just well, it has. We all know we have $1 billion in something that was originally budgeted for something like 83 million. And we know that a lot of that money is being wasted because our superintendent of public instruction, Tom Horn, decided that nobody was going to be accountable for anything under $2,000. To me, that's just fraud for the government to let that go by. I also think that people ought to be accountable. We ought to hold everyone who uses public money, who, whether it's at the beginning of the process or if it's a contractor receiving it, everyone ought to be accountable for how our dollars are being spent and for obeying the laws. Little things, I know this sounds silly, but I get really frustrated, and I think we all do, when you're going something like the close to the speed limit, at least, because I don't know how many of us actually go the speed limit, but anything close to the speed limit, and somebody goes zooming by you at 15 miles an hour faster than you know, and why is that? When I was younger, that stuff didn't happen. So, we need enough public safety officers that we don't let those sorts of things happen because that is a safety risk. I mean, if that person creates an accident in front of you because they're speeding or anywhere near you, you're probably going to be involved. And that whole concept has been lost on people. So, between government accountability for any public dollars and just holding people responsible, I think that's my accountability phrase.
Good. Thank you.
Francisca.
No, Jean. Jean is.
Okay, I hadn't raised my hand. I'd put it in the chat. I think, yeah, this is sort of a comment and a question. I think a lot of people in Arizona don't really get clearly the state government, that there are two representatives in each LD and one senator, and they tend to only vote for one in each office. So this is more to Holly than Edgar because he's running for Senate. But that Holly and Kevin are both running, and we can vote for both of them.
Very important point.
Yeah, good point.
Yes. We got Kevin. So yeah, when I got recruited to run in late December, I was asked if I would run. I took about 3 weeks to make the decision, and there were lots of reasons, but my very, very first question was, is this going to hurt Kevin's reelectability? And I sat down with Kevin for 2 hours, and we went through all sorts of permutations because he got elected. A lot of what he did to get elected was he was a single shot. You tell Democrats, only vote for one, don't use your second vote. And independents, what we kind of gamble on with that is that independents who believe that they are truly independent will vote for that Democrat if there's only one on the ticket, and then they'll vote for one of the Republicans. And if the Republicans end up splitting those votes, then the Democrat ends up winning because they get one from everybody. So, that's the thinking. And it worked for Kevin. Plus, he worked really hard. I mean, I won't put that, he knocked on a lot of doors, talked to a lot of people, and worked his tail off. And that really helped. And he raised a lot of money, which was very important because he could do a lot of advertising and get his name out there, visibility. This time, we're going to run two. So it's going to be Kevin and me on the ticket. And that's a bit of a gamble. But we were both comfortable with that, and Kevin especially, but also a lot of other organizations who understand all this stuff at a granularity that we don't. And they basically said, because Kevin is in there already and he's an incumbent, that makes him, it gives him kind of an extra boost to start with. Then, because of number one, because I'm a veteran, as Edgar said earlier, and number two, just the general attitude against Trump and all of the folks and all of the other incumbents who have supported him, and we can point to that a lot, and we will, at the Arizona legislature, then that gives probably room to elect a second person. And so that's why everybody basically said, we need a second candidate, and that ended up being me. Does that explain it?
I thank you. I think that's really helpful.
Good.
And we really have to get that out to people that they get to vote for two. Yeah. Thank you.
Francesca?
Thank you. In the past few sessions, there's been, well, at least one specific legislator, but many that had bills that do not protect our precious natural resources in Arizona. Overuse of groundwater and putting, I call them lobbyist bills because they seem to, they're not considering because especially what's going on with the Colorado River, the upper basin and the lower basin states, they still can't come to an agreement. And many of these bills will be depleting our groundwater. And also, I don't understand why there's more. They keep on trying to make things difficult for people that want to promote solar energy. They seem to want to go back to other things, even having many nuclear reactors. So basically, it's how can we protect the precious natural resources that our state has?
Let me see. I'll go ahead and talk about that one a little bit. So one of the things that, you know, there's people that, want to develop and build not just data centers, but other things. But I think there's I'm trying to look it up right now. I know there was some legislation that happened in the past that talked about this a little bit, but it's some of the current guidelines right now, but just continuing to reinforce them. Right now, something that's happening is you have like La Paz County, and they're trying to pass a bill right now that will let the water from La Paz County be used for Maricopa County, and that's just a problem. We're just counting on future problems when you do that. So I think what we need to do is we need to be really innovative, and we need to be smart in how we do it. And I've looked at some other places throughout the world that have water issues, and there's ways to do it. When I went to Saddlebrook, Holly, and we were knocking on doors out there, one thing that I noticed is that all these homes, none of them had grass, and there weren't a bunch of sprinklers going on. We need to be in a place where we're, like I said earlier, in harmony with our desert. I'm trying to find the bill that I'm talking about, but I mean, there are some bills out there, and there's other bills that we can add to it that, these rivers. And, I think there was a quote that said, if we keep doing what we're doing by the year 2050, some of these rivers are going to be dry. So we just need to make some conscious effort. I don't know, Holly, do you have anything for that? And I'm looking for this article that I read.
I guess, first of all, I will observe the obvious. We like to go camping. And when we drive out of Arizona, we're almost always going north because that's where all camping is, right? And up until about 4 years ago, about 4 years ago, we passed over a lot of rivers. And they were sometimes not running very hard, but the San Pedro being one of them, and it's a pretty significant river. At least it used to be. And there are lots more going north. They're dry. They are bone dry when I take 77, Highway 77 north toward Colorado, and even going into New Mexico. We rarely see water in any of the creeks anymore. So we're already at crisis, and I think that's something that the you would think the legislature would have been working on this instead of worrying about whether we're precinct voting or if we can do mail-in voting and stuff like that. Wouldn't you think they would have worried about this? So yes, I think what we need to do is the legislature basically needs to bolster the governor and say, go forth and negotiate with all of the Colorado Basin states, first of all, figure out what it is we need to do to resolve this, whatever those parameters are, thinking outside the box. And then the legislature needs to be behind her to pass whatever it is that she comes up with. And I keep saying she because I'm hoping and I'm expecting that Governor Hobbs is going to get reelected. So that's the beginning. The other thing is we need to start being innovative. We need to think like solar. If we could put so much solar, if we put solar receptors on everything that's exposed to the sun and then fed that back into the system, Arizona could light up at least the whole Southwest. And so maybe what we do is we use that as a bargaining chip. Maybe we use that as a bargaining chip with California to get some of their desalinated water. There are all sorts of things I think we can do, but doing nothing like the legislature is not an answer. We have to do something.
Well, we are at 5 o'clock now because this has been such a rich discussion. And I know there's one more question. Arlena, maybe if you could put it in the chat and we can, and Holly and Edgar can look at it and maybe chat back to you quickly or whatever. But
If I could just take 30 seconds. First of all, I just want to commend Holly for what she said on the Saddle Book of seeing 13 people and then bringing them to 400. I have not been involved in the political world at all. I'm just so awestruck by everything that's going on. I know that I have to come out of the shadows. I'm just encouraging us to, if we can create educational circles for people like me, who can understand a bigger context of what's going on, how to vote, legislation, all of the things that you folks are like talking about. I can't tell you how much is desperately needed because I didn't know where to go. Someone sent me the link today and I just said, you know what, I got to try something. So I just want to commend everybody for today's meeting. I thought it was extraordinary, but people need education right now, and bringing people out to have conversations, I think, is a must do.
Elena, I'm going to agree with you. And even to the fact, like, we need to know from all of you how some of these bills, some of these current statutes are impacting you on a day-to-day life. Because, like I said, we don't know everything. I mean, and we are always here to learn. And there's this quote by Maya Angelou that she says, I did what I knew, but when I knew better, I did better. And it's important for us to keep learning and keep evolving and keep being a lifelong learner. So I appreciate those words, Erlina.
And Arlena, it's good. Thank you for sharing that. You're right. It is education, which is ITAA's priority, is to get the word out. And so everyone here can get the word out and encourage people to come to our monthly meetings and read the wonderful newsletters that we put out. And that would really help also.
Well, let's thank our candidates for joining us and speaking, and thank you, Joe, for coming up with some really helpful questions. And it was a really wonderful session. So I'm gonna stop the recording now, and